welcome to AboutFACE Theatre presents 5 Questions With, and today's guest, director Jimmy Fay. Jimmy is the executive producer of the Lyric Theatre in Belfast. He was an associate artist and literary director of the Abbey Theatre, where his work as a director includes over a dozen productions, including the world premiere of Sam Shepard's Ages of the Moon and Jimmy's Irish Times Theatre Award-winning production of Saved. His work for landmark productions includes hit runs of Paul Howard's Ross O'Carroll Kelly plays, and he was also the founder and artistic director of Bedrock Productions, where in 1995 he was key involved in founding the Dublin Fringe Festival, now one of the key events in the Irish theatrical calendar. Jimmy, you're very welcome.
Hi, how are you, Bob? Thank you very much for having me.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. So we're going to start off with just what play or experience first got you into theatre? Jump right in.
I've seen a few interviews you've had, and it's great because nobody has the same experience. I don't think there's one thing. I mean, one of my earliest memories is being in school in Tala, and we all were brought into an auditorium, and there was what I think was a play on the stage, but I don't remember any of that. But I do remember somebody roaring from behind me, and this guy in a king's costume storms up to the set, and it was just electric. And I remember talking about that for weekdays afterwards with my parents. And you know, I must have been very, very young, 4 or 5, I think, and that had an effect. But then the next thing was, years later, I was in plays in school, and I really enjoyed it because it was a way to connect. It was a different thing, so I really enjoyed kind of being in plays and some of the school things as well. But I mean, the first play that I ever saw that really had a connection to me, that where I thought, okay, was probably Joe Dowling's production of Juno and the Paycock. That had Donald McCann and John Kavanagh and Geraldine Plunkett and a host of people, and it was early on in its run. It'd been at the Gate, but I think I saw it in the Olympia. And I went to see it with my parents again, probably when I was in my mid-teens, and that blew me away. That's one of the most vivid things even to this day, having seen hundreds and hundreds of plays since. Donald McCann and Jack and John Kavanagh, and their interaction on that stage was just unbelievable. I had very vivid memories of it, and it made the whole thing real. And it did more than just be a good play that you're liking. I also taught you about your history, because obviously that was about the early part. That was like 1920. It was with the Civil War, the War of Independence, I think. And so, like, I mean, that it suddenly opened up a whole different avenue of kind of thought and history for me as well. I loved it. But then, I mean, you're talking about plays that you got into. I mean, I became a kind of avid theatre goer after that. More, I mean, you know, I don't know if I watched anything. The next thing I saw, actually, strange enough, and this probably had a bigger effect in a different way, was Stephen Burkoff's Salome. And it was in the Gate, and I for some reason was walking on the Liffey floor that morning, or that just before it, and I happened to have enough money in my hand, and it was the preview. It was one of the previews. I think it was the first preview, and I happened to get a ticket, you know, just by going up to the box office and getting it. And I sat there, and Stephen Burkoff sat beside me, and Rosie Linehan. Now, I knew who they were. I must have seen a picture, and it was an amazing experience seeing Alwyn and Alan Stanford, and just this really stylistic kind of black and white, very, very vivid production. That blew me away as well. And the possibilities of theatre, and just seeing what you can do, you know, between, say, even those two simple ones like Juno and Salome were just extraordinary.
And did you start off directly with directing, or did you? How did you get your start in theatre?
Weirdly, I see it as inevitable now that I was going to theatre, because, you know, even when I would kind of play with my friends at home, I would orchestrate the games or would direct things or whatever else it would be. It was there, you know, I remember setting things up with toys when I was like very young and just working at scenarios. And then I became weirdly obsessed for no good reason. And it was before he died as well, with Orson Welles. And then reading a lot about him, and then being devastated when he died. And I was probably 14 when he did. So I don't know. And then he got to start again at the Gate Theatre. Now, the Gate is the one theatre I've never worked at. I just it a formative kind of, you know, like I remember reading about in his obituary in the Irish Times, and I still have it somewhere. I could have out and kept it. And that Ireland can take pride that Orson Welles threw himself in the orbit from the gate and from debuting at the gate at the age of 16. And that was a big thing, because I remember thinking he was quite young. And then obviously you find out about Citizen Kane, he wrote that he was 25. So I was obsessed with Orson Welles. And I was obsessed with people who achieve stuff when they were quite young. So I wanted almost immediately to leave school and start directing. It was a big thing in my head. I didn't really ever want to be an actor, but I thought it might be a way in, but I wasn't a very good actor, as anybody will tell you. And I wanted to write as well, and occasionally have, but never to the degree. Whereas directing was, I just thought, yes, I can assemble these things and make things happen.
So, okay, so you've talked a bit about Shauna Casey and about doing multiple Stephen Burkoff interactions kind of in the start of your career, but what's a great play that you love and why?
Yeah, I was thinking about your answer. Like, I mean, there's loads. I mean, and I have similar answers to other people. Like, I mean, obviously you start with Hamlet because all the psychosis and everything is a rewrite of Hamlet, But you go back, the Arstea as well. And but probably my favorite play, and I've never done it, and I haven't even liked the productions of it I've seen, and I still think it's a great play, is Long Day's Journey into Night.
Oh,
O'Neill. Look,
Oh, yeah.
And probably, I just remember reading that when I was 17, I think, and it really affected me, even though I didn't have a brother who was alcoholic, or I didn't have a father who was into drama, or a mother who was a morphine addict, or anything. Myself identifying with it. I just thought it was a really profound, and I still think, I read it every now and again, and I have a really hard, I had thought about directing a while ago, and I might get back to it, but it's a kind of, for me, it's, and people would say, oh, it's very traditional, but it just has everything in it. It has everything that you need to really make drama in it. And I think I think Eugene O'Neill is undervalued, actually. Even though, particularly here, which is weird. I mean, I don't know when the last time the Abbey or anybody did one of his shows. The Iceman Come Out was another amazing play that I saw quite early on with Brian Dennehy. And I remember going seeing it. It's 4 hours long. And there's an amazing picture here in the Lyric downstairs. They did also the Iceman Come Out with this huge cast. Again, I mean, maybe too many men in it, but I mean, actually the picture downstairs is quite good. But again, those epic casts are quite good. But Long Day's Journey Night is basically just, it's 5 people, and I think it's there's the maid, and then there's the family, and just everything it says about family and relationships, I think, is contained. That would be my favorite play, but it's not a play that I like to go see.
Can you tell us about a time in your theater life where something, things didn't turn out how you expected or how you anticipated?
Well, just one, like, kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, just nearly everything you do is a gamble. It's a chance, no matter what it is, even your dead certs. I mean, there's productions I've done that I thought were going to be great that weren't great, and there's productions that I kind of took for the money that end up kind of changing my life. Like, for example, I mean, I didn't really know much about Ross O'Carroll Kelly when we started rehearsing. I got to know an awful lot then. I really loved his satire. I thought Paul is brilliant, but I didn't see these plays going on to, I thought there'd be one play, and then I realized actually this could really, he's such a brilliant writer and such a great guy to work with, Paul Howard, and Rory Nolan as Ross is just phenomenal. So I thought there would be a series of plays, and it has been, and they've been really great. I mean, Breaking Dad particularly is one of my favorite new plays I've ever worked on. I've loved all that. I mean, there's, I mean, recently it's funny because, like, I came to the Lyric. I mean, I could talk about this, and I thought, oh, I'll direct it, have a lot more than I have been directing, and I've been directing a lot. Like, I mean, as a freelance director, I directed a lot, but I kind of thought I'd get my choice of all the plays because now I'm in power and I can just do Journey Tonight and just do everything. And I sort of started like that. I did Pentecost. I really want to do Pentecost, which is another play I love. I kind of have to love plays to do them. So, when you ask about what plays change your life, maybe every play you do changes your life. And Pentecost was a great way in for me in the Lyric. And so was working later on Rosemary Jenkinson's Here Comes the Night. But then I would pick plays and I think, okay, well, I want to, have commercial successes as well. So got Rita, and I want, we got a young guy, Oisin Kearney, to work in a version of that with Willie Russell set in Belfast. And I kind of absolutely looked at that for myself. And then I looked at Emma Jordan and I realized Emma Jordan hadn't worked in the lyric at all. So I invited her to work in it, and she made a huge success of that play, really brilliant. And then she do more things here as well. And then I had other directors coming in. I realized my job actually is to try and facilitate directors, young directors, new directors, or even not young, I mean, just people who shown promise, who want to do stuff. So I'm really happy with that. But it sort of surprised me that I've directed less here than I thought I would, because primarily I am a director, but I suppose part of my thing here was to direct building, you know, and that has taken, it's very difficult. I mean, I really admire people who do that, who are able to take time out. And, like, I read Peter Hall's diaries, and he's directing all the time in National, and then he's off doing an opera. And I thought, where the heck does he actually run the building? Because actually he doesn't run the building, like, or he didn't, you know. I mean, he would probably be the head honcho, but he was very much an emperor, and there was other courtlies. We don't have that luxury. I mean, there's brilliant people who work here, but I got to work closely with them, you know, just to keep it going. And I really enjoy that. I mean, I feel like since the first time since, say, Bedrock, that I have a really great theatre company here. And this is what the lyric is. It is a theatre company, as opposed to just a venue as well, you know.
That's beautiful.
So Jimmy, now you've been working in the theatre now for a few decades. Doing fantastic work.
I started
but what keeps you coming back to the theatre? What moves you? What excites you about theatre?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, because quite often an awful lot doesn't move me about theatre, doesn't excite me about theatre. I can get quite bored by theatre. I can quite, you know, find myself really angry at people who just do. I mean, angry at myself as well about, you know, if I don't take it seriously, because it's quite, it is a sort of, you know, you don't want to sound pompous out of it. You aren't dealing, you know, like, I mean, the people who go to see theatre are giving themselves over to you. You know, you can't really watch anything, films, or you can watch TV like a train. It can just go past you. You can watch stuff like that, but you can't, if you want to engage with a work of art, and theatre is a difficult work of art, and you got to really make sure that you've done everything in your power to make it as good as it possibly is, so you're not wasting people's time. You know, I mean, one thing I always think about is, like, when I started, and yeah, it is one thing I want to talk about, is like in the 90s, the people who influenced me the most were my peers. And it was a brilliant time. Like, I mean, Jason Byrne was doing Loose Cannon, you had Annie Ryan really in his zenith with Corn Exchange, you know, you had Pigs Back turned into Fish Amble, you had Rough Magic, you know, were always kind of honchos. And I mean, there's more, there was loads of other companies. There was Carl Shields doing his bit. There was plenty of people, like, and Jason, you know, to me was brilliant, and is a brilliant director. Like, I mean, because he was the first director I saw doing stuff, like, I was very into the overall, I really liked the vision. I really was a very, and am, I think, a visual director, you know. My wife would scoff at this, but I think I'm very good with staging. And I remember I went to see Julius Caesar, Loose Cannon's first show. Jason had pared the whole thing down. And these people were just talking, and it was almost talking, and there was a couple of people who really didn't like it, who really hated it. But I was so blown away, because it wasn't trying to ape or be something different, or try and be a TV thing or whatever else. It wasn't trying to be a film. It was just, it was pared down to real essence theatre. It was Mark Dalton as Brutus, and Susanna Derrickson, and there was a bunch of people in it, Kevin Healy. I mean, and these were all brilliant actors and really serious. And I thought, oh, he's got something. So I did what I always do, which is try and, you know, grab him before he becomes successful outside it, and make him work with me. So and we worked then together on Theatre Cruelty, and we brought a few other people into it as well. But Jason and me really sparked, you know, and we were very, very different. And I thought he was, you know, his psychological approach and everything was really inspiring. So I learned a lot from him, you know. I don't think he learned much from me, but I think I learned a lot from him. And like, he did Coriolanus, which is to this day, and he did with some people I'd worked with, like Johanna Connor as a designer and stuff, and just brilliant, just absolutely one of the greatest things I've ever seen ever, right? In the project at the Mint. There was an energy in the 90s that was really interesting, and you were asking about what kind of, you know, what you want in theatre. I want that energy always. I want that electricity. I want that taking a chance, you know, that people are, they're not just behind some academic book saying whatever, that, you know, people believe in performance and they believe in really, you know, you do a show, you want to change the world, and you want that. You want that at the other end of it, you know. And you can forget that sometimes when it becomes a job. You can forget, you know, you think, oh, I have to hit so many numbers, you know, to balance the books. I have to do so. But everything you do, including commercial work and so, you need to want to be able. Changing the world is maybe a bit stupid, but like wanting to make a difference. You want to show that's good.
Yeah.
So the weird failure is when you feel like you haven't got there, you know, like, I mean, when, and which is 99.9% of the time.
But we keep coming back for that 1%, right?
Yeah. And then you feel over for years.
Absolutely. So in your theater life, in your experiences of directing and as artistic director, has there been anything you've learned, any tool that you've used or that you've learned from theater that you feel has been useful in the rest of your life?
Yeah, I remember talking with Louise Lowe, because she was an assistant director before she went off to do, and actually I was thinking about that, just about the history of theatre, like in 80s and 90s, you had a kind of fringy element that was quite vibrant, you know, Druid were a big inspiration behind that from the 70s. And then kind of in the 2000s, it became this weird kind of professionalism where it became really, it was all about getting grants and all about applications. It still is, I think. But we were still kind of doing similar shows. And then I think from Anu onwards, she really changed the landscape, this theatre maker and this idea of like I remember talking to Louise, and she was talking about very intimate performances. I'm like, well, how are you going to pay for that? Now I have no idea to this day. I mean, I know she had grants and stuff, but how the hell she lived. But I think they were phenomenal. Laundry is, again, along with Coriolanus and stuff, I mean, one of my favorite things of all time. But I remember talking to her, and, you know, she was just asking, because she was just about directing. And, you know, Jason was the one person I talked about directing an awful lot. But we were talking, and, you know, I just thought, like, I mean, to be a director, you kind of need a couple of skills. You need like maybe a visual skill, you know, if that's your forte, or a choreograph skill, but also you need some sort of psychological skill so that you can kind of see around corners a bit. And you don't always do it, but you know, I mean, actors can annoy me sometimes because they think, you know, you're not a teacher as a director. You're expecting them to turn up and do their job. But obviously actors really respond to people who, you know, who are really able to kind of feed them and stuff like that. And that's vital. I mean, that is vital. You do need that as a director to be able to kind of communicate with actors, but it doesn't always work. And sometimes you block each other and it doesn't work. But, you know, I think, I mean, you know, there's a humility that you got to learn about theatre. You're not, as a director, always the most important person in the room. You're not as an actor even the most important, or the writer. You know, sometimes there's a communication, and this idea of collaboration and working together and empowering each other is much better than trying to be the one person who's the genius. In fact, and that only ever comes in reviews and stuff afterwards, where people really just write, you know, like, I mean, the first thing, I mean, so-and-so directed brilliantly and got such a great performance out of so-and-so. And you think, well, actually, you know, where's the actor's art in that one? Or, you know, or sometimes quite often the director wouldn't get mentioned or whatever else thing, because they didn't know about directing. Or they didn't see it because it wasn't, you know, there wasn't a big German expressionist moment happening in it. You know, yeah, it had been intricately directed, whatever else. But to me, the key, and what I love about theatre, is the collaborative nature. And I know that's a really hackneyed, obvious response, but it's the truth of it. You know, it doesn't work. Even if it's down to one person on the stage, they need the audience to collaborate with them. That's what it's all about. And it's funny because we just had a film crew in here. I was watching the director, and I mean, he was a brilliant director. He was, I mean, the way that person was talking with his crew and with everybody else was quite good, but to keep them in the vision. And then they were contributing as well and stuff. And that's what you do in theatre. You try and say, well, I've chosen this play to do, and we're going to go on a journey together, and you're all going to have different ideas about it. And that can be the danger, because sometimes somebody will have a very forceful different idea, and then you want to say, well, okay, I don't want to go that way, I want to come back here. You got to find a way of you know, weaving it in. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. But I think, yeah, I mean, I think bringing it into real life is like a marriage, like, you know, you guys, like, you know, my marriage is it's a collaboration. It's not always going to work. It's not always a stand thing, you know. It's not always going to be kind of, oh, you're so brilliant. Quite often you got to be pissed off with the other person, but you got to find a way of working together. And this is getting true. Like, I have a 14-year-old son now. It's impossible, you know. But he has a complete point of view, and you know, it's quite often I'm kind of gobsmacked. I go, where the fuck does this come from? But it's a really valid point of view. From his point of view, and from my point of view, is probably valid as well, you know. And you need to find a way of just communicating. And it can be difficult to communicate with a 14-year-old because they use words not at all. They will hide behind a phone or the headphones or whatever else. And you got to make sure that you're all in the same, you know, boat somehow, you know, if that's important to you. And you got to take on their concerns as well. And it's like Jean Renoir, the great filmmaker, but also, if you look at his films, he went from really, you know, I love, because why, like, I think we're all amateurs in a way. We get in because we're enthusiastic. And what scares me sometimes is the professionalism that's drawn. I see, you know, I see people getting obsessed with voice or getting obsessed with movement or getting obsessed, oh, it's not this right way. And you're thinking you're missing the actual essence of what actually an audience sees. You're talking about it in some esoteric way that, you know, you may think is high art, but actually it's just making it much more, you know, limited and something like that. And but Jean Renoir said, and sorry, I'm just, the brief biography of him is that he started as, like, I mean, obviously he was the son of a great painter, and then he did a war, and he thought, well, after the war, I'm not fucking going through that anymore, so I'm going to do what I want. Got his camera, was obsessed. His first wife made films for her. Then they got divorced, and they ended up making kind of these kind of left-wing kind of, not propaganda films, because they're certainly not, but they're really kind of, they're quite big and collaborative. And then slightly more personal, and Rules of the Game is one of the greatest films ever made about anything. And also, what's the famous World War I one, Grand Illusion, right? But in Rules of the Game, he coined a phrase, and it's really simple, but everybody has their reasons. That's the important thing to remember. When you're in the midst of an argument with somebody else, is everybody has their reasons. And so long as you can kind of empathize with that a little bit, empathy is a big part of it, you know, you might get to where you need to get to as well. But not to, you know, the important thing as a director as well is not to bow down if somebody else has really powerful voice in the room, but also not to ignore what the other people are talking about as well. I have no idea if I've answered your questions.
No, absolutely. I think brilliantly. Yeah. That's great.
You answered all of our questions, in fact, Jimmy, all 5 of them, plus 1A. But just as a bonus question, can you tell us anything about what you're working on at the moment?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't not want to talk about this because I think the time of COVID is kind of important. And I think, you know, different people have done different things. There's, you know, like, some people have done nothing because, you know, it's affected them or whatever. But if you're in a position of some sort of responsibility, I think one of the important things was to try and find work, or, you know, my job is fundamentally to try and find work for everybody, you know. There's a play and I want people to be in it. And, you know, try and persuade the Arts Council, the more people can have a play, the more economy will go, you know, like in that. And then suddenly when this all closed down, we had 2 productions that were in, one was in pre-production and one was just started rehearsal. 1984 was one, and then Good Vibrations about to go in. And they have both massive casts, probably have 11 each. So that was 22 people, which for a theatre the size of the Lyric was quite small. And unfortunately both had to be cancelled. And then there was money to be paid out. And then there was a bit of kind of like, you know, well, we can't give them the whole contract. We need to, you know, work it out, because we needed, you know, my priority also was towards the team to actually work in the Lyric. And, you know, we gone with furlough, which was really handy, you know, and all of that. But it's also awful because people are then slightly isolated more. We're all isolated in this time. And but I have a great team. Like, I can't tell you how dynamic the team is here. So we had a fringy production that we were doing called Newspeak, and that went into production. We decided we'd just make films of that. So that was the first thing out. Like, we did this kind of weirdly online soap opera. Then the BBC came on board and we commissioned like a load of writers, and we did Split Isolation. And then, you know, one thing led another. So I realized we could become a production hub. And that was what this, if we can't get an audience in, I think it's stupid to say just close the doors. If you're a production company, If we're just a receiving venue, that's a different thing. But if you're a production company, if you're a theatre company, which is what the Lyric is, you have an onus to employ actors and to employ designers and directors and writers and, you know, people that you can, and lighting, you know, all that. And so, you know, we set up a series of projects that wouldn't hopefully put the theatre at risk. And then also negotiate with other producers like the BBC and stuff like that. And one thing I would say the BBC was saying, like, love doing Splendid Isolation. They were serious of films. It would be great to really do something in the theatre. Like, they set up this, I mean, I wanted to play for today, but it's called Lights Up.
Yeah.
And I think it's partly because we were kind of negotiating with them. But then they said, oh, all theatres are going to be open in February. And I thought, no, they're not. There's going to be another lockdown after, you know, it was just obvious. But I decided, okay, well, we'll bring everybody off furlough. And they've been off and on at the beginning of November. And work on Sadie, the David Ireland play that Stephen Ray asked me to look at. And so Sadie was a real gamble because, you know, we went into production with that. Well, really, we hadn't quite signed a deal with the BBC or whether they were going to have their thing or not, but we decided we'd do it because it was good for everybody's soul, and it was. But every week of that rehearsal, you were relying on the actors and the ASMs and the stage managers and the director not to get sick, not to come with COVID for whatever reason, you know, just to completely self-isolate outside rehearsal, to bubble in there. And, you know, you're only relying on the goodness of people's, you know, whatever. Anyway, it was gamble. You know, any time that was Russian roulette, that could have finished and that could have been cancelled right up to before it was shot. And then it was shot and it was in a can. And then I didn't know what people would think of it, but the reaction to it has been fantastic.
Yeah.
And so it just made me think that, you know, I was thinking this anyway, but, you know, I think we have another 12 months of this, you know. It'll be back and forth. There'll be different times when we can open. We may well be able to open because of vaccination program here in July, August. But I think there could be another close down in the summer, or sorry, in the winter. And we just need to be prepared for that and kind of think of the long game a bit. And creating work. Because if you don't create work, then you're kind of going to be looking at losing jobs, and people's well-being and mental health is really, really difficult, I think, at the moment. So I think the more work you can create, the better. So we have a series of things that we put on kind of from May onwards. People are on furlough at the moment. May, June, July, and then Rough Girls is a new play that we're looking at by Tara Lynn O'Neill. It's 11 women. The foundation or the partition of Ireland, or whatever you would say, or, you know, whatever your politics is there. But it's basically about 11 female footballers who, you know, it was a huge thing here at the end, you know, from the end of the First World War to when they were stopped in 21. Because suddenly, and she's written a really vivid play about that. That's really agitprop and whatever else. So we've got some funding that we're able to do that. So if we can get an audience in, that's great. But if not, we'd be able to film it. This digital live thing is going to be a big part of us going forward. Because actually, not even because it's essential, and I think it is essential, it's also really interesting. It's interesting to be working, you know, on theatre, but also finding this weird hybrid between TV and film and theatre, you know. And I think there is I think a lot of people are looking at that at the moment. And can keep that going. But I do need to get back into, you know, because the one thing we don't have, and what the Lyric is reliant on, is an audience coming through, you know. So Christmas is what I'm thinking about at the moment, and I'm hoping, even though I think there will be another lockdown at that time, we can get some sort of audience through at that stage. Because you need it. If you don't have a Christmas season as a theatre, it's a working theatre, you're in real trouble, you know. And I'm more nervous about this year coming than I was, say, about last. I thought last year was so unusual for everybody. They hadn't got time to react except throw money at it. It's the old Keynesian way of economics, just fucking, you know, get it going. Now people are beginning a little bit more, well, that's not ethical, or, you know, grants will be a bit harder to come by, unfortunately.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your time.
Oh, you're very kind. Cheers.
And thank you to our audience for joining us. We really appreciate it. And if you liked it, please like the video and share, because theater makes life better. So we look forward to seeing you next time on AboutFACE Theater Presents 5 Questions With. See you then. If you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe to us on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and share. Thanks for watching.